Hey everybody, Neon here. I wanted to do some casting and analysis of some of the games that happened this weekend at the BTS tournament, of course, that happened, the draft tournament that happened, and I really wanted to do this for a couple of different reasons. One, I'm really interested in doing some casting and or analysis work, maybe sometime in the future, so this is a good practice, and it's a good place to get some feedback from you guys, so of course I'd love to hear any of your thoughts on it. But in addition to that, I also thought there were a few points in the course of some of these games that the casters didn't have a chance to go into as much depth about. I mean, it's pretty obvious as to why I have a little bit more chance to go through and rewind and watch things carefully and make sure that I catch all of the interesting strategic moments. You don't necessarily have that chance when you're in the booth, but I thought that it was interesting to do that as an educational experience. So in this one, we're going to start with, we're actually going to start with kind of an easy one. I'm hoping to do this basically daily, but it's going to be the first match of the entire tournament. We're just going to do the first game of Lifecoach versus FeelsGoodMan, who's on a Bananamancer deck, a three-color Bananamancer deck. So let's get right into the game. So we already have a rough start here for FeelsGoodMan. That Bananamancer is running headlong into the Mazzy, is going to be able to take that down on Lifecoach's side for him, which is going to give him a nice start to the gold. Just tell you a little bit about the decks that we're playing here. They're going to pull them up in a moment. There's just be a very short moment, though, that you can't really read everything for it. But on the FeelsGoodMan side, it's a 3-color deck, 3 blue heroes, 1 green, 1 black. The heroes that they're playing for the blue ones are Bananamancer, Skywrath Mage, Prelix, then the green is the Enchantress, and then the black is Sorlikon. On the opponent's side, it's Mazzy, double Bounty Hunter, a Darkseer, and a Magnus. So I think that the sizing of the heroes is very different on these two sides here, and also just there's lots of copies of track that we see in the deck for the black player, taking down doing a little bit of damage and taking down some health on the tower. Here we get a really unfortunate draw, a really unfortunate roll for the side of FeelsGoodMan, as the Bounty Hunter is going to be able to take down that Enchantress in one hit and get a nice base of gold. Now, it should be noted that on Lifecoach's side, he actually has access to a copy of Horn of the Alpha, which is a 25 gold item that gives 4 health. Not exactly impressive there, but the main attraction to it is that you get to summon a Thunderhide pack every second turn, and that's a 14/14 with Siege 6, so big beefy animal that'll be coming. Now this is a moment here that I want to touch on later in the broadcast, because I think that there's some interesting decision making that's going on here, and the panel, I think, didn't have a chance to talk about it in the level of detail that was sort of necessary. But we see FeelsGoodMan moving into the left lane with the Prelix. Unfortunately, that Prelix shows up right in front of the Mazzy, which means that it's just going to feed some more gold to the opponent. But this does allow the Prelix to play out the Aghanim Sanctum into the center lane, which can allow you to play multiple spells in the center lane. So that is at least something. Also, the center lane here, we saw the Magnus actually spawn in front of the Sorlikon. Another unfortunate roll of where all of the hero placements sort of landed. So I definitely think that FeelsGoodMan did not have a fortunate performance of the various instances of RNG here. Still, though, it's like there's a lot of reasons why things are going wrong. I mean, here we're going to get another brutal turn where we have the track coming down on the Sorlikon, getting up to an incredible amount of gold on Lifecoach's side after the Sorlikon comes down. We do get to play out the Censor, the Tyler Estate Censor. This decreases the mana of the opponent's tower. He's also somebody who's hard to take down. He's a 2/8, so that's a pretty tanky boy. And as a result, it means that it's going to be, well, now this play that we see right here, I actually really like. So he ends up, FeelsGoodMan rather, ends up ganking the Sorlikon on the Bounty Hunter that's in the right lane. Now, the reason why I think this is good is because right now, clearly, the left lane is not going great. The center lane is starting to slip away, and the Sorlikon doesn't help much in doing that. But by doing this, as actually able to secure the third lane, which you really need, and I mean, obviously, in this game, you either need to really take one lane or do a pretty good job of taking 2 lanes. So identifying at least one lane where FeelsGoodMan has an advantage or can establish an advantage is quite good, because if you're fighting on all 3 lanes equally and you don't have a foothold in any of them, then you're in a really bad position. Now, this is a really bad position, though, for other reasons, since Lifecoach is buying out just tons of items from the item shop. Does end up finding that Horn of the Alpha, which, as probably as we expected, given the fact that he was able to buy up so many items, was going to find it eventually. Now, of course, if you don't know this, the way in which the item deck works, if you're buying items from your own item deck, the one that you create before you start the game, you can buy as many of them as you have gold for, but it just presents them to you randomly. So the Horn of the Alpha wasn't the first thing that he saw, but he just kind of bought everything up until he found it. And that'll be coming down here and starting to take over the game. So here, we are going back to the first lane once again. We have the opportunity to play out some nice green cards. Now, I think that there's actually a sequencing thing here that's actually quite interesting, where the Lifecoach starts off the turn by playing out some low-impact cards of the... Yeah, so it plays out the Empower here. In some respects, I think the purpose here is to encourage the opponent to try to do something before launching the Horn of the Alpha. So yeah, and then you actually see that. So the FeelsGoodMan does deploy this Satyr, which I think is a wonderful opening now for Lifecoach to play this high impact card. And I think that sequencing of like when you want to prioritize playing good stuff first versus good stuff last is very interesting in the game. And in this instance, the fact that the opponent played this Satyr out early and then allowed you to play this the Thunderhide into it to just eat it up was pretty devastating. Now we get some Plague Wards that are coming out into this center lane. For those who don't know, Plague Wards are shown up here on the screen. They deal 2 piercing damage at the start of the turns, which makes it good that you're establishing it here, that you're kind of setting up the lane, setting up a presence. It means that anything that comes into the lane afterwards is going to be taking this ping damage and this piercing damage, so that's quite attractive. Still, this lane is not going fantastic for our friend FeelsGoodMan, and things are sort of slowly slipping out of control. We get out the little green Smeevil and buffing up the Bounty Hunter and the Revenant Signet Ring. So none of these plays are particularly fancy, just kind of developing stuff. Now, it should be noted that we don't use the concussive shot ability on the Skywrath Mage. The purpose for that is just to play for initiative. I don't think that it's super important here in the situation, but kind of like, why not? Because it's not really doing anything in this position. I mean, it does a couple extra damage, but it doesn't really accomplish much. I'm not sure whether that's correct or not. I kind of want the idea of just doing that in order to get it off cooldown again, so you can get more bonus damage. But maybe he's just thinking that I want to get initiative so that I can hopefully put something together. Prelix going to be coming down again, trying to find a place to put it. It's really attractive to put it into the left lane so that you have a blue hero in every lane. But, I mean, you're running out of blue cards to play here, which is problematic. You're not going to be able to impact the board nearly as much. So it's going to play in the left lane. I mean, I understand this purpose, and also the Con is going to the left lane as well. Now, that one is interesting, and the purpose for that is we have the Slay in hand for FeelsGoodMan, and this is the best answer that he has access to for dealing with these Thunderhide packs. So the Thunderhide packs are, of course, these 14/14 animals that are going to take things over, and the way that I think about this is the slays are a good way to handle it, but it's also kind of like bailing out a sinking canoe with a really nice bucket. Like, slays are the best bucket you got, but it's still, you know, you're going down pretty quickly at the same time. So we have a play here though that FeelsGoodMan has access to is play the Salamania's Favor first and then set up the slay that's going to be happening afterwards. But on the flip side of what we can do here on Lifecoach's side is that he can then activate Darkseer's Surge ability to move the Thunderhide pack before the Sword of the Khan's able to play out the slay for him. Since we only have access to one black hero on the side of FeelsGoodMan, means that you're not going to be able to slay the Thunderhide pack in any of the other lanes. Now, it's particularly interesting using the ability in this way, partly because you don't really usually think about the Darkseer's ability as being used on creeps, but in this instance, it's quite good to do that. Now we get a Dimensional Portal out. Dimensional Portal, very powerful card, especially good at kind of slowing things down in this way. Get another track out. I mean, it's kind of nice to do this, but at the same time, we almost have the entire items deck probably done, so it's going to be hard to utilize this gold properly. You'll actually see at the end of the game that Lifecoach just has a bunch of extra gold hanging around. But yeah, just more tracks coming down here, just totally style on the opponent. And this is also one of the problems that you have in a deck like FeelsGoodMan, was where all of the heroes on the opponent's side are just getting super beefy and super tanky, and you don't have any good comeback mechanics for that. And I think that you kind of really need something like Corrosive Mist in a deck like this. I mean, obviously you don't have access to that in every draft. It's a rare. So it's just hard, though, to come back in a deck like the deck of that FeelsGoodMan is playing, since it's about building board advantage, it's about building this wall of tokens that you're able to secure and keep healthy with your green spells, and eventually punch down a tower with the assault ladders. Now, this is problematic play and kind of shows some of the weaknesses of the deck. On behalf of FeelsGoodMan, we're going to be playing the Lost in Time. This is a 6-cost card that locks a number of cards out of the hand of Lifecoach. This is not a great card, though. 6 costs and not affecting the board is really problematic, and you really feel that here, where the Skywrath Mage just kind of like just dies, a bunch of stuff dies, like you're not really doing anything, and then this lane is just getting out of control. So really problematic here. And we're going to just see, the Ion Shell come out. This helps to kill that sensor that's been kind of pesky and slowing down Lifecoach's progression. Another thing specifically about the Lost in Time is that it's really bad against decks that have been able to acquire a bunch of items. So you can, for instance, see a lock on one of the item cards. He doesn't need that item card exactly. I mean, it's nice to have, but it's gone. So now we go to the final lane. This is the only lane that's going well for FeelsGoodMan. No real actions to be taken there, so move on to the shopping phase. Does have enough gold to buy a single short sword. Not exactly impressive. Well, Lifecoach buys a couple of items and is still just absolutely loaded. Just has nothing to do with all of this gold. So anyway, moving on to the next lane. There's no heroes to deploy here because they died in last turn. 3 of them died last turn, so they're not going to be coming out here. Basically, the only choice that you have in this position is maybe you can deploy some items on the Trellix, and you also have the choice between whether you're going to play the Dimensional Portal verse or so Venom verse. There's no other heroes that are available. There's a handful of these Slay and then the green spells. So the Dimensional Portal, though, it's good stalling card in this position, so that's not bad to use. I think that this is correct to use in terms of the ordering of them, because you would rather have the Plague Wards not be in front of the various units that could kill them and damage them. So doing this first is the Dimensional Portal first and then the Plague Wards second. It makes a lot of sense to me. But that second Thunderhide pack coming down on behalf of Cold Ford the Alpha is obviously pretty brutal. It's actually interesting to note that this lane is going very badly for FeelsGoodMan, but the Lifecoach actually hasn't even hit the tower directly ever. It's only been a result of these friggin' Thunderhide helps us. And also here, once the opponent has spent out all of their mana, then Lifecoach deploys the 7/7 in front of Prelix in order to take her down. So this is just a bloodbath, deal a bunch of damage, crush all these insignificant, puny units. We now also have the opportunity on Lifecoach's side to Town Portal scroll out one of the heroes from this lane. And also, I mean, this is the cross and effects. Cross lanes effects are so useful, especially when you've taken a lane already, and because it allows you to actually utilize your mana and do something productive in this position. So yeah, we get the home field advantage into the left lane. Town Portal scroll out the Magnus, and eventually then kill the tower, which is really putting FeelsGoodMan way behind. Now, in the right lane, FeelsGoodMan is ahead, but they're taking forever to burst down this tower. It's, I mean, not that surprising, given the fact that Bananamancer isn't great at taking towers, but there's also no cross-lane cards that they can do, that they can spend in order to utilize that mana, so that kind of just lies fallow again. 3 heroes coming in, once again, for FeelsGoodMan, all of them dogpiling into the left lane on the outside chance of being able to hold it, but the strength and the prowess of all of the heroes in that lane are just going to be really hard to battle through. That Slay is going to be good to battle against that little little Thunderhide pack. Also, by the way, that tree action there, what that was the home field advantage that disables the melee creep that's in front of the Roseleaf Rejuvenator, which is you know, it's a nice thing to do, but it's not going to do very much. Now, the part of the reason that they're thumbing over that Tower Barrage is for the purposes of showing that this could be useful to kill a few things, but I think that at this point, FeelsGoodMan has kind of given up mentally and could have, for instance, played the Slay in order to take down the Thunderhide pack. Would have been a good move in this position, set up some damage on the tower as well, but instead the opponent does eventually decide to land the Divine Intervention, and at which point FeelsGoodMan does decide to concede, given the fact that there's no real lines to victory here. So with that, I thought this was a really interesting game in terms of a couple of individual decisions and understanding kind of how things went so badly. So let's go back through a couple of those moments and talk about them. Okay, so what I actually think was the core thing that happened here, despite FeelsGoodMan definitely did make a few technical play mistakes, it actually came down really to just deck quality. Let's take these two examples as kind of a good idea, bad idea, or you do and don't, of what 3-color decks kind of are supposed to look like, I think, in the game. So first off, FeelsGoodMan, we have a total of 15 cards that cost 5 or more. So that is almost half the deck that costs 5 or more. In contrast, we have Lifecoach's deck, only 5 cards cost 5 or more. Now, by 5, that might be a little bit low, but 15 seems really high. Second, these cards are not good in FeelsGoodMan's deck for retaking initiative. Like, if things are going badly, if he's losing a lane, he doesn't really seem to have any tools to retake it, like really fight for a board. Like, there's no sweepers, there's no good removal spells, there's other outside of Slay, I guess, but like that only works for obviously the creeps. There's just no big haymakers that you can play proactively that you say is like, yeah, okay, now I'm taking over this lane, with the exception of Dimensional Portal. Dimensional Portal is definitely the best card in the deck on FeelsGoodMan's side. So that's something, though, that's a big problem in these 3-faction decks, when you really need to have some tools for retaking and reclaiming your boards when you get to the late game. So we compare that to something like Lifecoach's deck. Really what his tools are for doing this is to retake things if you're falling behind in some capacity, is just with a bunch of gold generation. Like, you double track something that dies, you get a bunch of gold, you get Horn of the Alpha, you can snowball advantage, and that works in any lane. That's not really situational. That's something that if you can launch it, it can be really, really powerful. Both of them have the Thunderhide pack in the main deck, so that's good for that. The Assassin's Shadow, that's also decent from the side of Lifecoach for retaking that kind of initiative. But that, I think, is a serious problem here. And then also, let's just compare the heroes that we have in these two decks in terms of their survivability, because I think that's an important element of 3-faction decks. On the side of FeelsGoodMan, we have Skywrath Mage, 6 health, no armor. Bananamancer, 6 health, no armor. Prelix, 5 health, no armor. Sorlikon, which is 6 health, no armor. And finally Enchantress, which is 8 health, 2 regeneration. So she's like, okay, for survivability. But let's compare this then to the side of Lifecoach. The red hero that they have, the singleton red hero that they have is Mazzy, 6 health, 3 armor, super survivable. 2 bounty hunters, so those are 7 health ones, and which is basically as survivable as you get in black, outside of Lich is the only one that really beats that. Then for the green heroes, we have Magnus, who is 9 health, 1 armor, and 9 health on Darkseer. So just so that you compare the amount of health and armor on the side of Lifecoach, it's just so much more survivable than the opponent. And that really, I think, manifests in the course of this game, is that just keeping things in lane is a little harder for FeelsGoodMan. It's harder as a result to play things out properly. And just like the mix of the heroes, I think, works out a lot better as a result. There's other things I could also note about the composition of FeelsGoodMan's deck, just like the mix of cards that are there doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. For instance, we have 10, I'm talking about just like color balances stuff. So like we have 10 black cards and 10 green cards in the deck. Now usually you want to have about 8 if you're just dividing things up by fifths. Of course, in the deck you can break this rule, but in this case I don't think this is a good place to break it, especially with the black cards, because you are relying on Sorlikon as your one black hero to cast everything, and she's just so fragile. So that is a hard thing about it. Like having 10 green seems like okay as a rule of thumb, but this is just given how tanky she is and how good she is at surviving relatively. But then also like you have just like all of these all these blue heroes that just have nothing to cast. You just empty your hand super quickly, relatively speaking. And so I just think that you top to bottom, there's some problems with the draft and problems with the deck for FeelsGoodMan, and basically everything that happened in the game can kind of be explained by that at some level. There are some tactical decisions that are definitely incorrect here, but I just felt that the token aggro thing that he seemed to be going for just didn't come together, and as a result, kind of floundered and died. There are a number of different strategic points in the games I thought were interesting. This is one, though, that I think would be a really useful beginner place to talk about things like hero positioning, because this is one that the panel actually I think made a slight mistake about, because they were kind of wondering about FeelsGoodMan decision that ultimately puts the Prolix in the left lane, and they sort of questioned that because it just ends up feeding to the Mazzy. Now they didn't have a chance to kind of think through things altogether, which, I mean, it's fine. I understand why. I've done casting before. You have different things to do than super analyze every nanosecond, but I wanted to super analyze this particular nanosecond. So with that, we're going to go through first an exercise where we're saying first, what is the position that we can place Prelix in order to maximize the chance that she survives the next turn, because you want to get her ability to proc, which gives you a bonus melee creep. So we're just saying that is our only objective. That our only objective is to position her to maximize the chance that she survives to next turn. Which lane should we place her in? We should also note that we don't know what lane Magnus is going to be landing in. We can see it now, but if we were actually in FeelsGoodMan's position, we wouldn't be able to see it. So let's start off with the rightmost lane, because this is simple. She has a 100% chance of dying there. If Magnus doesn't go to the lane, she lands in front of the bounty hunter and is going to be eaten by the bounty hunter. She trades with the bounty hunter, but we said that our only interest is to maximize her chance of survival, and she 0% chance of survival there. If Magnus joins the lane, like exact same. He just lands in front of the creep, and she still lands in front of the bounty hunter. She still dies. Okay, so that one's no good. Center lane. So there are a couple of positions that she can land. So first, let's do it for Magnus not being there. 2 creeps coming into the lane. One of them is guaranteed to show up in front of Sorlikon, and one of them is going to find a new lane, so either to the left or the right. We're just going to go for the right for the purposes of this conversation. So one of them in the center, one of them to the right. That means that on our side, we have a 1 creep and our Prelix that are coming into the lane. One of them is going to show up in front of the bounty hunter, and one of them is going to show up in front of the creep. If she shows up in front of the creep, she lives. In front of the bounty hunter, she dies. So that is also, like, then it's a 50-50 shot. If Magnus shows up into that center lane, then he has a pretty good chance of killing her as well. So that kind of goes down to a third chance, 1/3 chance. The reason why it makes it so difficult with the Magnus is, I mean, he only has 4 attack, but there are 4 copies of power, 4 copies of the shield that from Darkseer, Ion Shield, that would be able to get that extra damage to kill her. So only a 1/3 chance of living there kind of, probably even less than that with some technicalities. But yeah, so that is the way things land there. Now that's actually very similar to the leftmost lane, because if Magnus goes there, she's actually probably 100% chance of dying, because if she's either going to be landing in front of the Mazzy, which is definitely going to kill her, or in front of the Magnus if he shows up there. So because she's going to probably be hit by some of these other abilities to get just that little bit of extra damage. Although it's not quite 100%. It's like 95% chance of dying probably. But yeah, if Magnus doesn't go there though, then she has a 50 chance of living with that creep that's coming in as well. That could land in front of Mazzy. She could land to the right, for example, and she'll be fine in that situation. So, to review then, I think that if you kind of assume that it was random about whether or not Magnus was showing up in the leftmost lane or the rightmost lane, I think that it's kind of a coin flip in that respect. Then Prolix probably has a slightly higher chance of living in the center lane, but that's only following that one objective of maximizing her chances of living. The big reason of why Prelix goes into the left lane is to play the Aghanim Sanctum and maximize mana usage. So you play the Aghanim Sanctum in the left lane, from the left lane, rather, into the center lane. The center lane then can have a refresh on the mana, which allows you to actually get some of these cards out of your hand, which is really all that you want in this case, because you're worrying that you're kind of not able to deploy things and not be able to maintain control of your lanes and actually deploy your cards. So given that positioning, I think that makes sense to place it in the left lane, even though there's a slightly higher chance of her dying. When she goes there, she does end up dying, does spawn in front of the Magnus. Now, if you were just interested in getting some gold, the chances of maximizing that go into the right lane, because you have 100% chance, assuming there's no protection effects on the bounty hunter to be able to take him down. That's a little bit dicey given the fact that your opponent has 20 gold, so there's a pretty good chance that they actually have bought some items in order to add to survivability. So anyway, like, all this is really to say that I think that it was a correct decision to put the Prolix in the left lane, even though it doesn't feel good because ultimately it dies. Also, another just very minor consideration, if you put it into the center lane, she actually does some damage if things go badly, like matching up against both matching up against the Mazzy and matching up against the bounty hunter. Both of them feel bad, but definitely matching up against the Mazzy is worse, since Mazzy has 3 of the gold. I mean, I guess also you could say that matching up against the bounty hunter is particularly bad because you have a chance of getting tracked more, which we don't know whether the Sorlikon is going to be dying in this position. But just especially given the fact that I think that there's a higher than average chance that Magnus goes into the center lane because he can set up a kill on that Sorlikon, means that Prelix has a higher chance of surviving in the left lane, all things considered. So anyway, all that being said, I actually like this decision by FeelsGoodMan. Disagree with the panel there. I don't think they did this level of thought about this as like super little decision, but just wanted to put that out there to kind of give you some of the ideas of how you should be thinking about hero deployment if you have all the chance to think through it from top to bottom. But that'll be it for today. There are a few other new moments throughout the match that I thought were interesting, but I'll leave that for another time. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please give me any sort of feedback. I'd love to hear that. I'm trying to get better at doing this. I'm trying to also decide on the format, because I like the idea of being able to go through some of these particular moments in a great deal of depth, and it's hard to do that during the actual casting session, but I also just want feedback on the casting session as well. So thank you so much for joining me today. Be sure to check out our sponsor, Gaming, and anything else that's going on in a+space. Talk to you all again soon.